ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of College Football Tuesday. I'm your host, Larry Frank, along with my good buddy, Zach Mckinnell from the Blue Bloods, and we want to welcome you all here on a very, very newsworthy night here on College Football Tuesday. Besides reviewing or recapping some games and some surprises this weekend, which is nothing new in the college football season, and as well as previewing the upcoming week, we got some storylines to talk about, obviously, and it was broken yesterday. Zach Mckinnell of Blue Bloods broke it for us on Frankly Speaking Sports yesterday, and that's, of course, the dismissal of head coach of LSU Tigers, Ed Orgeron, at the end of the year. Zach, why don't you tell us, obviously, a surprise timing just because they came off a big upset win at versus Florida. Tell us what led up to this and what you know.
Yeah, so initially everyone just kind of was pointing to the on the field stuff, the obvious. I mean, since the national championship season and Joe Burrow leaving, that team hasn't been very good. I mean, last year they took a upset win over a top 5 Florida team to get them to 500. And this year they're sitting there, losses to Auburn, a comeback loss to Auburn, where Auburn overcame a 13-point deficit to beat them. They get handled by Kentucky on the road. I mean, 42-21. And if you're LSU, there's not a fan in the stadium that thinks Kentucky's a 21-point better team than LSU year in and year out. And on top of that, you look at, just them not being competitive against the top teams in the SEC, particularly Alabama year in and year out. Other than 2019, they were getting blown out. But as of today, the latest news is the off the field things Coach O was doing led to his dismissal more than the on the field. So apparently the hitting on an administrator's wife at like an event off the field really rubbed a lot of the boosters the wrong way. Also, he was bringing multiple women around the program and interrupting practice to let their children participate. And this happened more than once with more than one woman and child. So if you're a Power 5 SEC football coach, you can't have that. Nick Saban's not bringing around random children and interrupting game planning and practice before big SEC games for stuff like that. Also, the culture surrounding the program in terms of the sexual assault investigation really didn't do him any favors being named in that assault case, ignoring Darius Geis's case. And I know there was a lot of off the field stuff, and that really caught up with them. And then, the winning the national championship, as we all know on the show, is as sad as it is, winning puts a lot of makeup over stuff off the field. Well, now that he's not winning, a lot of this stuff has come to light. Off the field contributed just as much as on the field to the firing of Coach Ed Orgeron.
Well, and with the buyout being over $17 million, you knew something bigger than just not winning had to be happening here. That's a lot of money for a coach that's only been there for a couple of years, was less than 2 years away from winning that championship that they won 2 years ago. It's not even the 2-year anniversary. But I'm hearing from my sources, Zach, and I don't know if you heard the same thing, that they felt like he was losing the locker room. He was losing the respect of the players. Supposedly, he was prone to having temper tantrums this year, throwing chairs, cussing at players. And a lot of the people said that led to the part, because you think about it logically, $17 million. You just beat Florida. I mean, you're not the worst team in college football, although the standard's a lot higher in the SEC. $17 million, you would hold on to it. But at the end of the day, if you're losing your locker room and your players don't respect you, I don't care who you are. If you're Nick Saban and you're losing your locker room, a change has to be made.
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely losing the players, and I mean, they saw. I mean, so I'm just going to put it this way. I mean, anyone listening can comment too. I mean, if you were a football player right now, Larry, and your coach was bringing people onto the field, interrupting your game planning for a game against Auburn, a game against Florida, would you respect that coach?
Well, right, obviously not.
And then after that, him coming out public this offseason saying he didn't interview Bo Pelini for the defensive coordinator job. You're getting paid. You're getting paid. He was the second highest paid head coach this year behind Nick Saban. And
Yep.
you're getting paid almost $9 million a year, and you don't have time to interview somebody over Zoom. Me and you how quick did you just send me the StreamYard link and I jump on and you couldn't interview your defensive coordinator? For LSU, you didn't have time to ask him a question, what scheme he was running, what he would bring, recruiting. You just said, I'm just not going to interview him. I'm just going to bring him in and screw it. We'll see what happens. And then you have a historically bad defense. And then you admit you didn't interview him. As a player, you're looking around like, this is the guy that I have to trust my entire future with? Not, I wouldn't. And then on top of that, you look at the comments he made after the Kentucky game 2 weeks ago. He said in the press conference, and I quote, their running game really surprised me. Did it? With the leading rusher in the SEC being in the backfield of Kentucky, the rushing game surprised you. You didn't think they were going to run the ball with the guy who had the most rushing yards in your conference, and y'all prepare for the pass. Yeah, I mean, when you look at that, I mean, he just didn't seem one focused. He seemed clueless down the stretch. And if I'm a player, that's not someone I'd want to play with. And I think LSU realized that.
Yeah, and let me ask you this: going forward, Zach, what's the future hold for Coach Orgeron? Are there going to be some teams that would be interested in him? I mean, whether we like it or not, whether it was his staff or not, whether it was his players or not, he did win a national championship. That does count for something. I mean, can we still look at maybe a Power Five? There's a lot of teams out there at the end of the year with teams that aren't winning that could be looking for coaches.
Yeah, I mean, you got the Nick Saban boot camp right up the road. I mean, we've seen what 4 or 5 SEC coaches just go be assistants. He'll be an assistant somewhere. I don't think he'll get a coordinator role. Really, I don't think he's. I don't. After what we saw at now Ole Miss and LSU, you got your 2 head coaching jobs. You failed at both. I mean, failed to a point. You won a national title on the back of a generational offense that you didn't have anything to do with, but you got your 2 chances. You failed at both. You're not getting another SEC job, at least a head coach. I can see him being a D-line coach somewhere. That's his specialty. Get him back to his roots, coaching D-line, but he's got some other personal things he has to work through before I think we see him wind up anywhere.
A lot of people want to know what the timing of this. Why not wait a little bit before announcing, especially after such a huge win, versus the Gators? Why not wait? Why did this have to be announced now? Was there that much pressure on, from the board or from the boosters at LSU?
I talked to someone with their feet on the ground in Baton Rouge. This agreement started getting worked on Sunday morning after Kentucky. They were going to announce it regardless if they beat or lost to Florida. The Florida game had no impact. They had the announcement scheduled for the day after the game already. They were going to announce it whether they beat Florida by 100 or whether they lost by 100. Coach Ed Orgeron's fate was sealed in Lexington when that clock hit 0. And they announce it now because it gives them a head start. The only job open, we had one open up yesterday or today or last night. The only job open is USC right now. So why not go ahead and get a head start on interviewing candidates? And the reason they did it is Scott Woodward, the AD, said he wanted to have a candidate in place before National Signing Day or early signing day, which is the 17th of December. The quicker you fire him and let him know he's gone, the quicker you can get on the ball and start identifying candidates, get a search committee together, everything like that. It's better to be out in the open rather than drag Orgeron along and have a PR nightmare trying to do an entire search committee behind his back. So they said, listen, it's not working out. I think they respected him being a hometown guy, being a home state guy. He is encompassing Louisiana. So they didn't want to do him dirty. They said, we'll just mutually agree to part ways and we're going to get on with our search so we can save this recruiting class, because they have some 5-stars in that class. They have a number 9 class in the country. They don't want to lose those kids. And there's already been kids I've mentioned on our show that said they're leaving if certain coaches get let go. They got a lot of decisions on their hand. And so now it gives them 3-4 months to figure it out rather than 2-3 weeks that they would have waited until after the season.
Any names popping up that could be a candidate? Well, I know I've heard some, but anyone that sticks out to you that you could see being a leading candidate for this job?
So I talked to my guy down at LSU today. The top 3 names that I've been hearing and he's been hearing is Jimbo Fisher, Mel Tucker at Michigan State, and
Right.
Billy Napier at Louisiana Lafayette. Those are the 3 names right now that are probably at the top of the list. Apparently, they talked to James Franklin and they didn't come away impressed. So I think James Franklin took a step back on the list. Billy Napier would be my pick. Just personally, Billy Napier and Mel Tucker would be my 2 picks. But they're worried about Napier never being a head coach at the Power 5 level. He comes from Louisiana Lafayette, but I think his track record being the coach that recruited Amari Cooper, recruited that wide receiving core at Bama under Saban, and Saban said Napier was his top assistant while he was there. That's a glowing review to have. I mean, Nick Saban's vouching for you. You probably did something right. So he has the SEC recruiting experience. It's just, can he lead the program and handle the pressure of an LSU job? Because there's no pressure at Louisiana Lafayette. You can win. He's winning 10 games a year, and they're about to build a damn statue for him. So can he move from Power 5 up? The group of 5 up, Mel Tucker's an interesting one. He comes with the clean track record. He cleaned up the mess at Michigan State after the whole D'Antonio situation. And on top of that, they want to. So LSU's thing is they want to hire a high character guy, especially with both of their past 2 coaches being accused of sexual assault cases. You want to hire the cleanest guy you can. Mel Tucker is that. 2, look how quick he turned Michigan State around. They're undefeated at number 9 in the country right now after 1 season. And so he's done a great job at Michigan State, and he's worked under both Saban and Kirby Smart at Bama and Georgia. And he has SEC connections, so he has the recruiting ties. And the number one thing Scott Woodward said he wanted was a guy with significant P5 coaching experience. That is Mel Tucker, regardless of where it is, and he's got the SEC ties. And then the number 1 candidate that has shockingly emerged is Jimbo Fisher. I personally don't see why Jimbo Fisher would leave A&M with all the money they're paying him. He's vehemently denied it. But as we know, Tommy Tuberville told Ole Miss he was only leaving in a pine box, and then he left for Auburn the next year. So I don't take anything coaches say in press conferences seriously. Jimbo Fisher has the LSU ties. He was on the national championship staff in 2003 under Saban. He loves LSU. He knows Scott Woodward very well. They are very close friends. Jimbo Fisher, apparently, according to all sources, has expressed interest in the job along with Napier. I don't know if they talked to Tucker yet, but he apparently has really impressed them thus far in the search. So those would be the top 3 guys. I would love to see Tucker and Napier get it. And then a dark horse. I don't know how Woodward did it. He's the only person, according to LSU insiders, that he didn't want to reach out to was Nick Saban. They reached out to Dabo, supposedly, about this job, and wanted to see if the rumor was Woodward said he wanted Dabo to tell him no. He wanted to offer him the moon and make Dabo turn him down. So they're going after anybody and everybody outside of Saban, but Jimbo, Napier, and Mel Tucker are the top 3 candidates as of right now.
All right. We're going to move on to some other news. Came up yesterday that I was able to put on my website was Washington State really didn't have a choice in this matter. Fires head football coach Nick Rolovich for not getting COVID-19 vaccine. This was a state mandate. This was a mandate done by the state of Washington where they had no choice. Not only did they let him go, they had to let 4 other coaches as well go because they did not get the vaccine. And this is a Washington State team that I think has won now 3 in a row. 3 games in a row. So once again, the timing of these things, but this is a situation where, for whatever reason, and you don't know it, I don't know it, whatever reason he has for not getting it, he gave up a lot. When you look at this, he's getting paid the $3 million salary right now. So he's given up. Here's a guy that went from being a high school coach. Now he's in Washington State. Now he's given up a beautiful salary, $3 million, just to prove a point that he doesn't have to get a vaccine.
Listen, I mean, I just got off my live stream on our show and someone asked about this, and I'll say this, okay? One, the outrage at Washington State got to stop. There's Washington State had no choice. I've talked to our Washington State guy we had on the show. Washington State didn't want to fire Rolovich. They begged him just to get the first shot, just so he could stay the head coach. He just had a personal reason that he didn't want to get it. And like I said, I'm a football guy. I'm not an ethics guy. I'm not a medicine guy, anything like that. So I'm not going to say whether he should have or not. Right. All I'm going to say is that's a lot of money to give up. And for me, there's probably a lot of things I'm just saying that I would personally do for $3 million a year.
Right. And like you said, he's had to either have this unbelievable belief or an unbelievable reason for not getting it done. And once again, that's his personal decision. We don't on this show talk about other subjects, like you said, about why are people not getting the vaccine, whether we think they should or shouldn't. That's not what we discussed.
Not my place.
Right. No. It's not our place. But at the end of the day, it was worth $3 million for him not to get the vaccine. So, for whatever reason it is, unfortunately, I think that was state mandated, but we're hearing a lot that a lot of these universities could be going to this and the states could be going to it too. So we'll have to see, but just so everybody knows.
I'm pretty sure California already has it. I think California and Washington were the first two to do it. So I think that has to mean all the California coaches are vaccinated as well.
Yeah. Well, what we're going to do, folks, is when we come back, we're going to take a quick station break. We're going to come back and we're going to recap the weekend that just happened. And once again, it was no different. We had some upsets. We had some good. We had some bad. And we had some ugly. We'll talk about that when we come back right after this message. Welcome back to College Football Tuesday. I'm Larry Frank. Alongside of me is Zach Mckinnell. And Zach, another week, another couple of surprises. We're going to review about 5 or 6 of the games, maybe a little bit more of what happened this past weekend before we go to what we're expecting this weekend. And, when you look at the first game, and I'm going to put it first because you deserve it this week, my friend. A great game by Auburn. And you know what? When you look at this game, I wrote a couple notes down because personally, I thought this was by far the best game that Bo Nix might have played all year. That's just my opinion from the times I watched him. He used 10 different receivers in this game. He had 292 yards passing, 21 of 26, Zach. 20, and you can't tell me anymore that this guy doesn't have potential because he really and the most amazing thing, like I just said, is the amount of receivers. But in this game, Auburn turned a 3-point deficit into an 11-point lead on 3 huge plays that happened within a span. I think it was 3 or 4 minutes in that game. And real quickly, and I know you're going to hit on it, one was the strip sack for the touchdown. The other was the defense came up big on 4th and 3rd and 4th and 3, and it only allowed Jefferson to get a yard on a keeper. So that gave them the ball back. And then what happens next? Nix to Demetrius Robinson for a 71-yard touchdown. I mean, that span of 3 minutes right there was a big part in that game. And Auburn, Arkansas, say what you want. I know people are making excuses. They're tired. They've had a tough schedule. Well, this is football. Get over that. You're supposed to, no one said playing these teams are easy, but let's give Auburn credit where credit is due.
Well, I mean, I don't think you can say the schedule. I mean, Auburn just got off a back-to-back of traveling to LSU and playing Georgia. I mean, that they had just as tough of a road as Arkansas. I mean, so I don't think you can say the schedule really helped them out there. But I mean, like you said, I mean, I would go a step further, man. I would say this is the best game Bo Nix has played in his career. I don't think you can name one that he played honestly better. I mean, like you said, 21 to 26 for almost 300 yards outside of the one interception. I
Yeah.
mean, he played a big game. I mean, the one away is perfect. And that last rushing touchdown, he showed his athleticism. The number one thing, though, is the wide receivers finally helped him out. Bo Nix didn't do anything differently, in my opinion. This was the first game Auburn didn't suffer from drop problems. Coming into the game, they were one of the leading teams in the country with drops. They finally caught the football. And you see what Auburn can do down the field in the deep passing game if the wide receivers just catch the ball. They had a big explosive play early in the game to a kid who we've been waiting to hear from, which is Javarius Johnson. And then you mentioned the huge play with Demetrius Robertson, the Georgia transfer. It shows. If I would have told you on our show last week that Tank Bigsby would run for less than 100 yards, you would have said Arkansas would have murdered Auburn. Because that was the one thing. And then Bo Nix came and went. Also, the front seven for Auburn played outstanding. Yes, they gave up some rushing yards, but I don't think you could ever stop the rushing attack of Arkansas. But they ran for 232 yards, but what they did was they made clutch stops when needed. You mentioned the 4th and 1 or 2. You mentioned, the red zone opportunities they had. Auburn's defensive line played great. They got pressure on Jefferson consistently all game long. Colby Wooden from the defensive end spot played outstanding for Auburn. And also, you got to give Auburn some credit for not allowing any explosive plays through the air. They did a great job limiting KJ Jefferson's deep ball, which was key as well. You got to give Auburn some credit. And man, you're sitting here looking right now at this Auburn team, right? And everyone's saying, "Oh, the sky's falling," including myself. And I had to put myself in perspective this weekend. They have 2 losses. They're 5-2 right now. Their 2 losses was 1 score to Penn State on the road, who's a number 7 team in the country, and then a loss to Georgia, which it was single digits until late in the third quarter. It was a consensus number 1 team in the country. So 2 pretty good losses, and then looking ahead, you get Ole Miss, A&M, Mississippi State, and South Carolina. I think you say Auburn has a chance in all 4 of those games. Ole Miss is going to be tough. A&M after the Bama win is going to be tough, but Auburn should beat Mississippi State and South Carolina. You're looking at Auburn with their only 1 loss in conference. If they can win the next 4 games, you're looking at a 1-loss Auburn and a 1-loss Alabama in the Iron Bowl for a chance to win the SEC in his first year. I mean, I think if you wrote a script and told Auburn fans you'd be 5-2 on October 19th with a chance to win the SEC West, Auburn fans would have paid Brian Harsin $10 million. You got to give Brian Harsin some credit for keeping this team on track. They had 2 tough losses. They squeaked by Georgia State. One thing to say about the Brian Harsin team that you couldn't under Gus Malzahn is they get better week in and week out. They've gotten progressively better throughout the season, week in and week out. So Brian Harsin deserves all the credit in the world, man. And this Auburn team's playing some really good football right now, and I didn't think we see it at this point in the season.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, we'll talk about Auburn a little more, I'm sure, again later. But yeah, great win, and this is another game. If you look at the statistics in this game, they'll fool you because the key to this game was some big plays. You mentioned the defense. They came up big on certain plays. I mean, when you look at the statistics, the Razorbacks had more first downs, better third down conversions, and fewer penalties than Auburn. Yet Auburn, if you look at the score, they won convincingly, So a great job. And like you said, it takes a couple of key plays, and the momentum. When you stop somebody on 4th and 3, they go for it and you stop them. You just know what that does for a team.
I mean, and also, before we move on, is Arkansas the best 3-loss team in the country? I mean, Jesus Christ, man. You look at how good that team is, and they're 1-3 in the SEC. 1-3. I mean, you got to give Arkansas their credit. I mean, they are Sam Pittman still should be a candidate for Coach of the Year, and they might have 5 losses, man. That just shows you how tough that SEC West is for
Oh
them
yeah.
to be 1-3 and be that good.
Well, they get a little break this weekend. They
Mhm.
play. I won't say it.
Arkansas Pine Bluff.
Right. And so it's, I mean, a game they should win, but we never say never on this show because we know what
Listen,
happens.
I cover SWAC football. They're not going to win. But Pine Bluff has been atrocious this year. They're giving up like 400 yards through the air. Arkansas by 50, and I'll put 1,000 on it. It's Arkansas by 50.
I agree. They should definitely should. Now, a game and a surprise all at one. We hit on this a little bit, and when I say that LSU ran away with this game, I'm not talking about the score, but what the heck, Tyrion Davis Price, 287 yards, 3 touchdowns. When you look at the quarterbacks of Florida, both Richardson and Jones, both of them didn't look good. I know you and I have said on this show, and we debated, should Emory Jones play? Should Richardson start? But they both looked bad, in that game. I think they each had 2 interceptions, 4 turnovers in that game. And, there was a period in this game that LSU was running the ball so effectively. I think it was like 15 or 16 consecutive times they ran the football. That's just incredible. And I thought Max Johnson, he didn't make any mistakes. He did not cost the team any issues. Only threw for 133 yards, threw for 3 touchdowns. It just shows you that when he had to make the plays, he made the plays. But talk about this running game for LSU that happened on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the game, listen, I'm not going to put much stock into what happened with Anthony Richardson. I mean, this falls on Dan Mullen. This kid comes in cold feet and gives you 4 touchdowns in a game against a very tough LSU defense. And I don't think he turns the ball over if you just get him some experience. But as we know, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. You can't just keep throwing this kid in cold feet with no preparation and just be like, yeah, please save us. I keep giving the ball to Emory. It's like eventually, like having a younger brother. He's like, let him play with your toys. Every time he does, he breaks it. Well, let him play with it. We're just going to let him play with it. Then you'll fix it afterwards. Like, can we just give Richardson the starting job and realize Emory Jones isn't who we thought he was? I mean, because we've seen Emory Jones not perform against Alabama, against LSU, times all season long where going into the Alabama game, he had more interceptions than he did touchdowns. How is he keeping the starting job other than seniority? I don't understand it. But LSU on the flip side, man, let's just say the 4 interceptions won this game. Without the 4 interceptions, this game's probably not even close. But you got to give Davis Price some credit. LSU's weakness this year, man, has been the running game. They were averaging less than 100 yards rushing per game, and he put up almost 303 touchdowns. He deserves the MVP. LSU finally figured out their run game situation. And for Florida to be so stout against Alabama at times against the run, something finally gave with that defense. And right now you're looking like, man, Dan Mullen, what are you doing down there with all that talent? Like, yes, you keep going to New Year's Bowl, New Year's Six Bowls. You keep doing this and that. But you got to eventually put it all together and have a solid season. And right now you're looking ahead. I don't see how they even compete with Georgia right now. So now you really got to take a tough look at yourself in the mirror and say, where do we go from here for Florida?
Yeah. And, what's surprising about this game, Zach, is I don't know if you knew this, but Florida had 0 penalties in this game. And usually when you have 0 penalties in a game, you're usually going to be close to the winning side of the game. But, you're hearing a lot of stuff now down in Gainesville about Dan Mullen, what is going on. A team that played Alabama is so great, came back and nearly won that game. When does the pressure start falling on Dan Mullen now? He like you said, he's got the talent, but the execution of that talent is not being displayed right now.
I mean, you got to put it on them right now. I mean, when are you going to win something? I mean, yeah, you won the East last year against the Georgia team who got behind the eight ball because they started the wrong quarterback. I mean, if JT Daniels starts that Florida game, Georgia runs away with that game, in my opinion. And on top of that, like you, I don't see a way they beat Georgia this year. I mean, I understand it's a rivalry; anything can happen any given Saturday, whatever you want to say. But right now, I think we could fundamentally say Georgia's a better football team than Florida right now
Oh,
by
no doubt
a
about it.
wide margin. And on top of that, moving forward, you've already got beat by Kentucky. What happens if you get upset again? You're talking about third or fourth place in the East alone. Because looking at Kentucky's schedule, Kentucky is going to finish 11-1 or 10-2. I mean, they have nobody in front of them. Kentucky should beat everyone in front of them. And so you're looking at Dan Mullen like, you're supposed to be this quarterback guru. You had Dak Prescott. You turned Kyle Trask into an NFL draft pick who didn't even start at his own high school. Felipe Franks played well at times. What went wrong with Emory Jones? That was supposed to be your guy.
Yep.
And what happened? And they have a really good kid coming in next year out of Florida as well. But you got to look at Mullen and being like, what's wrong with the defense? You trusted Todd Grantham, who you trusted at Mississippi State. He has not delivered. I would expect Florida to move in a new direction with a new defensive coordinator next year. And then if they still can't turn it around, you're going to have to be looking at Dan Mullen potentially on the hot seat, which is something I would never say because I am the biggest Mullen defender for the most part. But losses to LSU like this are inexcusable when you're Florida and have that much talent against an LSU team who already knew their coach was fired going into the game. So it was an inexcusable loss, especially giving up 49 and 300 on the ground to LSU.
Yeah, we're going to move over to the next game, my friend. And here's a game again. Texas had and we talked about this game, and I told you I thought Texas was a better team than Oklahoma last year. Last week I said. And what happened was they got a lead, and again they gave up the lead. And when I look at this game, I did not think, and I'll get your opinion, I thought Klay Thompson did not look effective in this game. He had 2 picks. He was sacked 3 times. Bijan Robinson got his 135 yards. But Oklahoma, I mean, how about Jalen Warren? He 193 yards on the ground. And then, a big part of this game ended up being Tanner Brown making 4 field goals in this game. So give some special teams here credit for Oklahoma. But this is a game, if you watch this game, and I don't know if you had a chance to, but A&M led 17-3 and then 24-13 behind the 3 touchdowns by Robinson and ended up losing.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at Steve Sarkisian and be like, how are you not finishing games? And it's so weird to me because I was looking at this game and, I rewatched it back because I was kind of flipping back and forth. So I'd like record all these games and look back. How do you have a running back like Bijan Robinson and you have a lead and he only gets like 8 carries in the second half? How is that the strategy if you have a generational talent at running back and you have to run the clock out? You couldn't run the ball in the second half. You put it all on Casey Thompson, and you ended up losing the game. And you got to give Jalen Warren all the credit in the world. He's a Utah State transfer who came to Oklahoma State and was buried on the depth chart. He started out as the 4th string running back week 1, and due to injuries, he found his way to the starting job, and he's putting up numbers like this, down in the Gundy and that stat. But he puts up over 200 on Texas this weekend. And you have to start looking like what's missing. What's missing in the second half execution? Is it a lack of adjustment? Is it a lack of focus if you get a lead? And that's going to be what Steve Sarkisian has to focus on, is building that culture. It's a culture that Nick Saban already had. It's a culture that Kirby Smart has. It's a culture that Ryan Day has. That's what separates the elite coaches from the average and good coaches, is that culture of we're going to win the game regardless if we're up by 50 or we're down by 50, we're going to execute our game plan. And that's what's missing right now for Texas. But Bijan Robinson is a generational talent. This kid's special to watch. I enjoy it. He should be in the Heisman conversation as a running back right now. But with Texas losing these games, they're really killing his chances because you got to be on a good team to even be in the Heisman conversation now. them losing these games really hurt them. And you're looking at Texas like, man, you should have had 2 huge wins right now.
Yeah.
Texas could possibly be a top 10 team if 1 or 2 plays don't happen.
Yep.
And Spencer Sanders didn't play his best, but I was talking to my Oklahoma State guy today. Even though he doesn't ever look impressive at quarterback, he's just a gamer and makes plays when they need to be made. And in the second half, he made enough plays for this Cowboys team to come back and get a big win. Oklahoma State deserves credit. And that Bedlam matchup versus Oklahoma at the end of the year is looking very, very good right now, as both these teams just keep finding ways to win. Neither Oklahoma or Oklahoma State are winning pretty, but you've got to give them credit for just getting a W in that column.
A win is a win is a win. That's what we always say. And, a game that surprised a lot of people this week. And when you talk about a well-balanced game by a team on both sides of the ball, Purdue the Boilermakers came up versus Iowa with an unbelievable game plan. First of all, give credit to their defense. 4 sacks, 4 interceptions of Spencer Petras. But what the heck happened to Aiden O'Connell? What did he eat for breakfast? My goodness. 30 of 40, 375 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then an additional rushing touchdown. And he teamed up all day long. It looked like he could hit David Bell, who had 11 receptions, 240 yards, 1 touchdown. And this was a game, Zach, when neither team, Iowa or Purdue, neither of them rushed, I think, for over 80 yards in this game. This was clearly a dominant game by Purdue, and Aiden O'Connell, who has not been very effective this year, had some issues throughout the season with, throwing some picks, came out and we talk about a performance earlier. We were talking about how great a quarterback played. Here was another great performance.
Yeah, and this isn't new. Let's give credit where credit's due. Purdue and Jeff Brom know how to do this. Jeff Brom's 4-1 against Iowa over his tenure at Purdue, and this is Purdue's 13th win, Larry, against a top 2 team in the AP poll. 13 in their program history, and this is the second time they've done it under Brom. Because remember, they beat Ohio State when Rondale Moore had that explosive game, and David Bell was Rondale Moore's teammate, and he went and had his game. And let's not understate the fact that Riley Moss and Matt Hankins hurt game, the 2 All-American corners leading the Hawkeyes in interceptions this year. They're both out. But once the All-American cornerbacks and Hankins and Riley went out, they had no answer on the back end for David Bell or this passing attack led by O'Connell. But let's also be honest with ourselves. Analysts like myself, the national media, we just kept ignoring the glaring issues of Iowa. We all knew the offense was atrocious. We all knew that if they didn't run the ball, Spencer Petras wasn't going to be able to win you a game. We all knew that the defense wasn't solid outside of a few players. But what did we do? A win is a win is a win. And we said, it doesn't matter. They can overcome it. They can run the ball. They can control the line of scrimmage. Well, what happens when you can't? And we found out what happens when they don't. We found out what happens when you miss. That team is a Jenga puzzle with all the pieces missing, and we're ignoring all the holes. We're like, we're going to go for that middle piece, and they just hit it too hard, and everything collapsed. That piece you knocked out was Hankins and Moss going down, and the run game not working. Iowa has some serious offensive identity issues to work out. The defense is still fine, but Iowa had glaring issues, and it finally caught up to them this week when they caught a Purdue team that was not afraid of the moment. They're not afraid of Kinnick. They're not afraid of playing top 2 teams, and you could see that in the way Purdue played this weekend.
Yeah, and Purdue, one thing I didn't mention, 9 of 16 on third down conversions. Mm-hmm. That's a formula for success. That's keeping your defense off the field, sustaining drives, and keeping them fresh. And that is definitely going to win ball games. Now, a game we didn't talk about yet, but we were definitely going to get to, and you hit on it briefly, but the Georgia-Kentucky game, this was just a matter of Kentucky meeting one of the best defensive football teams, arguably the best in college football. I mean, this was just a game where, give Stetson Bennett some credit, 250 yards, 3 touchdowns. The defense only gave up a total of 243 yards. They sacked Levis 3 times. I mean, this was a win. This was Georgia football. I mean, this is where Georgia comes. They kill you with that defense, and they held Kentucky to 13 points.
Yeah, and I mean, let's give Kentucky some credit. I don't think they should hang their head at all. I mean, they played as well as they could have played against Georgia. I mean, it's just clear that they didn't have the talent that Georgia had. I mean, but they still had a 22-play, 75-yard, 11-minute drive in the second half to cover the spread at least. But man, let's give Stetson Bennett his credit. The mailman delivered this weekend. That's his nickname, the mailman. 14 for 20, 253 touchdowns. And the moment just doesn't look big for him. Last year, he looked overwhelmed against Alabama and against some of the elite teams like Florida they played. But this year, he looks like he really developed some skills. He's not afraid of the moment, and he's ready to go make big plays. And now you're looking at, even when JT Daniels comes back healthy, how do you justify sitting Stetson Bennett right now with the way he's been playing? So Kirby Smart, who, let me just say this, has the worst track record for quarterback decisions I think you could ever have in your lifetime, in terms of not starting Fields, not starting Eason, starting Fromm over, and starting DeJuan Mathis last year. He is terrible at picking quarterbacks. But who are you going to pick over Bennett and Daniels when he comes back? That's going to be a question. The defense, like you said, Nakobe Dean is, in my opinion, one of the best defensive players in the country at linebacker. That front seven is just unblockable. I mean, when you have Jordan Davis at 6'6", 330, running like a 4.8, what are you going to do with him? I mean, just realistically, there's nothing you can do. They played stout defense. They ran the ball, let Stetson Bennett eat off play action, and they won the game. But you got to give Will Levis, the offensive line for Kentucky, some credit for hanging in there. But also, they didn't have anybody outside of Wan'Dale Robinson really making plays at the wide receiver spot. They're really missing Josh Ali, who's out for the season with a leg injury right now at the wide receiver spot for Kentucky. But I have no doubt, man. Right now, I think Kentucky can go 11-1, 10-2 this year with the schedule they have in front of them.
Yeah, and I agree with you. This Kentucky team, the rest of the way, definitely they could have a very successful end of the year here coming up. Now, one last game I want to get to before we get to next week's or the upcoming games this weekend. There was one game, Herman Edwards' team goes down. Utah upsets Arizona State 35-21. Was this a big surprise to you, or is it being made bigger than it was?
I think it's being made a bit bigger than it was. I think Arizona State was a little bit overranked, but let's give Utah some credit here, man. I mean, they're sitting there at 3-0, leading the South Division right now in the Pac-12 over UCLA, over USC, over this Arizona team. They're in control. They're 3-0 in the South, and one of their losses came to BYU, which was a top 15 team just last week. I don't think you can really hold Utah as like a huge upset. I thought this matchup was very close. Their losses are to San Diego State and BYU, who are two of the best group of 5 teams in the country. I think Utah was a bit underrated coming into this game, and Cam Rising at quarterback has been playing lights out. He did have 2 picks this week, but he is just a gamer. They were able to run the ball for over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, and the defense was able to make plays in the second half. They adjust so well over halftime. They allow 0 points from Arizona State in the second half. You got to give Utah some credit, and Kyle Whittingham is coaching his you-know-what off over there in Utah, and I would not imagine that anyone would be surprised if they make their second Pac-12 championship appearance in 3 years.
Well, we're going to take a quick station break, and when Zach and I come back, we're going to highlight some of the upcoming games this weekend before we wrap it up. We'll be back right after this. You are listening to Frankly Speaking Panthers on Tobacco Road Sports Radio. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Frankly Speaking Sports. I'm Larry Frank with Zach Mckinnell. Hope you're enjoying the show so far. We're going to go into the upcoming games as I move around here to get to those. Here we go. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about them. And I'll tell you what, the first game, Zach, that I'm going to bring up, and once again, when I bring these games up, there's no specific order. I'm just pulling these games as I think. And one of the games to watch, and one of the guys who I think is definitely one of the better quarterbacks in the league, has to be Pittsburgh quarterback Kenny Pickett, who is 2,000 yards already this year, 21 touchdowns, 1 interception. They also got wide receiver Jordan Anderson, who has 9 touchdowns this year. Can Clemson beat this powerful offense of Pittsburgh?
Man, it's going to be probably their toughest offensive test of the season. I mean, Pitt has been playing so well and so under the radar. Like you mentioned, Kenny Pickett should be in the Heisman race. I mean, with the stats he's putting up, he's better. He's put up it's him and Bryce Young, in my opinion. I just got off my live stream talking about it. Kenny Pickett deserves his props. I mean, he's top 5 in the country in passing touchdowns, rushing touchdowns. I mean, he is up there in almost everything. I mean, passer efficiency. But the thing with Pitt is they're doing such a good job of pushing the ball down the field, man, especially in the intermediate routes. But on the deep balls for Kenny Pickett, man, 20 plus yards down the field, he's completing them at a 65% clip. 65% on passes 20 plus yards down the field. That is an asinine rate. I mean, that is crazy. And he's got 12 big time throws, and his PFF passing grades over a 96 on deep passes. And so for Clemson, you have to establish the line of scrimmage, get a pass rush on Pickett, get him out of the pocket. And also, you got to figure out your offensive consistency. Clemson's biggest thing has been a missing run game. And with Will Shipley out, Kobe Pace and Phil Mafafa have to have a big game this weekend. And also, DJ's got to get better. I mean, you look over their past 2 games, and this offense has slowly but surely improved. But they're probably going to have to put up 30 points this weekend to even have a chance of winning against this Pitt offense. But I've already released our preview on this, so if you want more information on that, you can check that out. But I actually have Pitt winning this game, and I got Pitt winning by 7, man, 30-23 over Clemson this week. And I just think that offense is too good, and I just can't trust Clemson to keep scoring because they have not shown any offensive consistency. What I think Pitt will do is the NC State method. They're going to run the ball 30, 40 times, even if it's not for a high average. And Kenny Pickett is just going to do like Devin Leary did and pick apart the secondary, and they're going to force this Clemson team to score. I just don't think Clemson could keep up this year, which I never thought I'd be saying in the preseason, that Clemson would be losing to Pitt because they couldn't score. But that's what we've come to nowadays, and I think Clemson drops this very important game.
Yeah, I just can't believe Pickett – with 21 touchdowns, only as much as he throws, and as much as he throws over 20 yards per pass, it's incredible that he only has 1 interception on his record. Just an incredible record. And I agree with you. If he's not a candidate for a Heisman Trophy this year, then nobody should be, because he's having that great of a year. Now, when we go to the next game, the question here, Oregon versus UCLA. UCLA 5-2. You and I have found out if they don't have a running game, UCLA, they are not going to win. If Charbonneau can't run with the ball, or Thompson Robinson, their quarterback, can't get some rushes, they are not going to win. Oregon will run away with this game if they go one-dimensional. They just can't handle it. Meanwhile, the big question for Oregon is going to be, how good could Travis Dye do versus this UCLA defense? And I don't see him having much of an issue having success versus them.
Yeah, I mean, the loss of C.J. Verdell was huge for Oregon. I mean, at that running back spot, they lost him for the season against Stanford. That was a giant loss. But the key for this Oregon offense is to run the ball, just like it is for UCLA. You look at Travis Dye. You have some young guys who just came off the injury report that could play a big role this weekend for Oregon, but it also just has to be has to be a playmaker like he was against Ohio State. He can't be, a statue in the pocket. He has to be efficient down the field. Just make plays when they come up. That's all he has to do. And on the UCLA side, Britton Brown and Zach Charbonnet have to have big games. They've made a living in the A gap, but sadly, this defensive line for Oregon is legit. Headlined by Kayvon Thibodeau, of course. We all know the stud that he is coming off the edge. Right now, I just think Oregon's D-line is just a little bit better than UCLA's offensive line. They're going to be able to slow down the run, and I trust Thibodeau to be in the backfield all night long, getting after Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And Chip Kelly just hasn't shown me he can win these type of games at UCLA. Mario Cristobal always delivers. His team's always ready. I have Oregon coming away with this one in an upset. I can't believe I was saying that. UCLA is the favorite right now, the betting favorite, over Oregon by like 3 points. So I have Oregon, shockingly, as the number 10 team in the country, pulling the upset.
Yeah, and to me, it's not a surprise because I agree with you 100%. Now, the next game, we put USC versus Notre Dame, and I'm going to tell you right now, if USC has a prayer of winning this game, Keaton Slavis cannot turn the ball over. I mean, he just cannot turn the ball. We know what Notre Dame brings to the table. We know the great tight end. We talk about him every single week. Mike Mayer. I mean, Notre Dame, they're 5-1. They haven't always won pretty, but I think, I don't pick Notre Dame, as you know, much throughout the year, but I think this is a game. They're at home. I don't think they lose this game.
Yeah, it really depends for me with Notre Dame's quarterback situation. They had a much-needed bye week. Did Jack Cohen in this quarterback room get any healthier? Did they get any healthier on the offensive line? Did they get any healthier just overall with the bye week? And also, you mentioned it, Keaton Slovis has been getting killed with turnovers this year. He has to keep the ball out of harm's way this weekend. But right now, I'm looking at this USC team who is just they're in turmoil pretty much. I mean, they're allowing over 150 per game, almost 400 yards per game, and they haven't been consistent since they fired their head coach in Clay Helton. So for me, I trust Brian Kelly to get this team ready. I trust that Kyron Williams can get it going this weekend against USC. I also think Notre Dame could probably get a close win this weekend against USC.
All right, we move on, my friend. LSU, can they keep the distraction of Coach O being gone at the end of the season? We all know, Matt Carroll of Mississippi, the great quarterback who I'm a big fan of. He has 14 touchdowns, only one interception this year. Can LSU stop the big play of Dontario Drummond, who is that big playmaker on Ole Miss? The question's going to be, these are two offenses that can put up some points. LSU showed you what they can do, what they put up 49 points versus Florida. But at the end of the day, I think Ole Miss is going to be too tough for LSU.
So just to add a wrinkle into your prediction, Matt Corral might be out this weekend with an injury. That he got banged up at the end of that Tennessee game, and Ole Miss said today that he might not be able to go this week against LSU. So Ole Miss could be playing without Matt Corral this weekend, which means that John Rice Plumlee or one of those other quarterbacks on that roster might have to step up. The thing for me is, can this Ole Miss defense slow down the passing attack and I guess the rushing attack after last week of LSU? For me, if Matt Corral starts, Ole Miss wins this easily. But if Matt Corral is out, I think Max Johnson and these LSU Tigers could absolutely pull the upset off in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out later this week about whether Corral is available or not against the Tigers.
If Corral's not available, how important is Brees Hall in the backfield?
I would say pretty valuable because you look at Corral being their lead rush, so you got to have someone step up. Paris Jr. and Snoop Connor have been outstanding on the ground. I mean, Snoop Connor has 9 rushing touchdowns. Jerry and Ely also is someone who is going to play a big role, but Snoop Connor and Henry Parrish are both averaging almost 6 yards per carry. They're going to have a big game if Matt Corral is out this weekend.
All right, let's see. Did I miss this game? No, here we go. Okay, the battle of running backs, I call this one. I love both running backs on this team. Number 8, Oklahoma, 6-0 versus Iowa State, 4-2. You got Jalen Warren obviously having a great year. Why did I say Brees Hall? I was talking Brees Hall the next game. I'm sorry, buddy.
Yeah, you're good.
Of Iowa State. Yeah, that's what's happening. I'm getting old, buddy. I'll be okay. But Brees Hall of Iowa State, the 2 great running backs. This is a game. Iowa State fools us. We talked about Iowa. We talk about Iowa State. I mean, how good are these teams from Iowa? Well, Oklahoma, they're putting the W's on the board, 6-0, going for 7-0. Does Iowa State have a prayer?
Yeah, I mean, Iowa State's the favorite in this game. They're a 7-point favorite over Oklahoma State right now. So you have 2 top 10 teams as 1-score underdogs this weekend going into this game. For me, the running backs are going to do their thing.
Take that with a grain of salt. Yeah, take
those for sure.
Spreads, and because you and I both know, I don't know what they're smoking over there, but for anyone to first think, Oregon, I think it was the other team that was an underdog. We talked about, for anybody to put them as an underdog or Oklahoma as I think it's just, it has to be in this game. Maybe Iowa State's at home, so they, maybe think a little bit more of it, but I don't think this one's close.
Yeah, I mean, I personally would say it. So the running backs are going to do their thing. Warren and Hall are going to be great. They're really great running backs. It's going to come down to who plays better at quarterback for me. Is Spencer Sanders or Brock Purdy going to make who's going to make less mistakes and who's going to make the play to win the game? I think the quarterback who performs the most consistent and has the most efficient game will win this game, just based on how this season has played out. I personally think Oklahoma State can pull this one out as of right this second, but I think this game is going to be very close. I actually think this game could probably be I think this is going to come down to a last-second touchdown or field goal just because of the running game. The running game is going to keep Iowa State in this game with Brees Hall.
All right, we move on to Wisconsin, 3-3 versus number 25, and I'll say it, they moved into number 25, Purdue, despite a 4-2 record, but this is a game, in my opinion, that you cannot expect Burns from Wisconsin to win this game for you. You're going to have to ride Malusi, and he's going to have to show up to run the ball. Purdue, as far as Aiden O'Connell goes, at quarterback position, if he plays a game like he did versus Iowa last week, watch out, Wisconsin. If he goes back to playing the type of game where he's prone to make mistakes and throw interceptions, this game will be a lot closer.
Yeah, this game is going to be very interesting because there's 2 very, very good defenses going up against each other. But like the last matchup, this is going to come down to who doesn't turn the ball over. You look at Mertz, 7 interceptions, O'Connell, 5 interceptions. Both these teams run the ball fairly well. Wisconsin runs the ball fairly well, but Purdue only averages 8 per game on the ground. They air it out. So this is going to have to be a game to test the back end of this Wisconsin defense. But right now, I can't trust Graham Mertz to win this team an important game. So I think Purdue probably edges Wisconsin out this weekend just because Graham Mertz probably – I mean, I don't think anyone in the country can say they trust Graham Mertz not to turn the ball over going into a big matchup, especially after we just saw Purdue intercept Spencer full time in a huge top 2 matchup. So I think Purdue pulls this one out and continues their positive momentum.
All right. Now we got a couple more games. Then we got what we call some at-large games that I picked. This one, it's not really a question. I just want to put it up because it is an ACC matchup, and you never know what happens. But NC State, I believe, Devin Leary going against the the Hurricanes, Miami Hurricanes. Any chance NC State has trouble in this game?
No, because Jared King's out for the year, so they got a backup
That's right.
quarterback too.
Yep.
NC State by a million. I think that's all I got to say. NC State will win this game.
Yeah, and I knew King was out, but I have to mention that because Jared King already said how great they were going to be this year. So I'm going to use his name every single week to rub it into him. Because I'm not a Miami fan, you know that. Now, a couple very surprising team, the state of North Carolina. You think of NC State, you may think of the Tar Heels, but how about those Demons? Wake Forest 6-0 versus a very, very decent Army team. Wake Forest ranked number 16th. Obviously, they don't necessarily play the competition some of these other teams play, but this could turn out to be a better game than a lot of people give credit for.
Yeah, the only thing is I don't think Wake Forest is going to be sleeping on Army. They almost upset Wisconsin last week on the road, but you look at Wake Forest, they have to go to West Point to play this game. So it's going to be a tough road game, but for me, I think Sam Hartman's too much through the air for this Wake Forest team. And I also think Wake Forest's defense is going to be able to make a few key plays to win this game. But I can see the upset potential in it. I just don't think Wake Forest is going to fall for it because at this point, Army's not sneaking up on anybody. So I think Wake Forest pulls out a fairly close win up there in West Point against Army.
And it's amazing. They would be 7-0 if they win. Incredible. Now, three games I think 3 games here that I just picked that I said off from the FBS. First game, wanted to get your opinion on. A lot of people don't give this game credit, but when you look at it, these are 2 pretty good teams. They're only 4-2. I say only 4-2. It's Maryland and Minnesota. Minnesota, you and I talked about earlier in the year. We thought they were going to be a decent team. And Maryland surprised me so far a little bit this year. This game is in Minnesota. What's your opinion of this one?
Yeah, right now, I just think Minnesota's playing a little bit better football, man. The offense is finally starting to click. They've gotten 2 pretty big wins over Nebraska and Purdue the last 2 games, while Maryland has been blown out by Iowa and Ohio State the past 2 weeks. I just don't trust Maryland to be able to stop Minnesota, and Minnesota always plays tough football when they get a home game in Huntington Bank Stadium up in Minneapolis. I think Tanner Morgan just makes enough plays through the air to get them to win, and I trust Potts to run the ball against this Maryland team, which really made Iowa's offense look legit, which is really hard to do. So I just don't trust Maryland's defense to make enough plays to win this game.
All right. Does San Diego State stay undefeated this weekend, playing an Air Force team that is 6-1, and they're playing at Air Force?
Yeah, this one's kind of going to be a tricky game because I can see how both teams can pull this one out. Air Force is the favorite because it is at Falcon Stadium on the Air Force Academy base. It's going to be who could run the ball, man. Neither of these teams pass the ball very well. Both teams are averaging less than 130 yards passing. So this game's going to be like an hour long because they're just going to run the ball. These teams are rushing for a combined almost 600 yards per game combined. So the ball is not going to be passed at all. This is going to be a little odd. I think Air Force pulls this one out just because I trust them to establish the pace of the game, and they're going to outrush San Diego State, and I don't trust their quarterback to be able to make enough plays through the air to win. I have Air Force upsetting San Diego State this weekend and ending their undefeated season.
All right, and the last game that I picked, unless you have another one after it, is a game that is just sneaking up on people that could be a very, very tough battle at Fresno State. Nevada, 5-1, playing a decent Fresno State team that is 5-2.
Yeah, in this game, I think I'm gonna lean Fresno State here just because they've been inconsistent. I trust to go make some plays through the air to get them the win. I know Carson Strong's been playing well. I I just thought Fresno State really showed some things last week against Wyoming, coming off of a big upset loss against Hawaii. They looked much better. Their defense is much better than Nevada. I think their defense and Jake Hayner are just going to make too many plays for Nevada to pull the upset this weekend.
All right, before we go on to the last topic and wrap it up, any other games, FBS, HBC, anything that you see on the board that could be of interest?
Yeah, tomorrow night, actually, Coastal Carolina, Appalachian State is going to be a very, very interesting Sun Belt matchup. You know, two teams that have won the past three Sun Belt championships. Appalachian State is welcoming Coastal Carolina into Boone, North Carolina. It's always a tough environment to play. So for me, that is definitely a game to watch this weekend because that really could determine who's going to end up with that Sun Belt championship.
Now, when you look at that game tomorrow night, I believe Coastal Carolina is still one of the undefeated teams in college football. Let me ask you this. How, and we talked about this because of strength of schedule and things like that, how high, especially with all the weird stuff going on in college football this year, what's the highest you think realistically that Coastal Carolina can finish this year should they not lose a game?
Probably 8 to 10, somewhere in that range. I would say I would give myself an 8 to 10 range. I don't think they'd be any higher, especially because of the Big Ten, man. You look at how strong those strength of schedules are going to be because they all got to play each other. So the Big Ten champion is going to have to win like 5 top 10 games to get the championship. And so I just think the Big Ten's too strong. The SEC is going to jump them, of course. Yeah, then you've also got the Wake Forest factor. If they win out, they're definitely jumping Coastal Carolina. And then on top of that, Cincinnati's going to control the group of fives whole life. What could happen is Coastal Carolina could probably finish like in the 10th place range. And Cincinnati is going to get that group of 5 bid if they don't make the playoffs. So it's going to be very tough for Coastal Carolina to get any respect. But to go 2 straight years with only 1 loss on your record, you got to give them some credit. But I just don't think they haven't played a ranked team all season long. So for me, the highest they could possibly get if all chaos broke loose is probably about the eighth spot in the polls, I would imagine.
Okay. All right. Our last topic of the night before we wrap it up, folks. We're going to get Zach's opinion. Zach, your top 3 as of today, of course, and this is based on what you've seen throughout the year, your top 3 Heisman candidates who will compete for the Heisman Trophy so far this year.
Oh, God, 3. Man, that's going to be tough. Okay. So I would probably start with Bryce Young. I mean, he's the odds-on favorite just because being the Alabama quarterback, you're going to be the favorite. He's got over 2,000 yards passing, 24 touchdowns, only 3 picks for the year, almost 70% completion percentage. So he has so many stages to have his Heisman moment. Possibly the SEC championship, a huge, probably top 25 matchup against Auburn. You know, he's still got Arkansas to go up against. He's still got LSU coming into town. He's going to have so many stages to really earn his credit. So I'd say Bryce Young would be in my top 3. You know, and if I'm being realistic, even though I want to include Kenny Pickett, right now he's getting no respect. He's probably going to have to prove it this weekend. So I'm going to keep him out. I would say Kenneth Walker II would be my second place guy right now. Michigan State running back, leading the country in rushing yards per game, 3rd in rushing touchdowns. He has 1,000 yards, over 6.5 yards per carry, nine rushing touchdowns, a receiving touchdown. And he's been the key factor for Michigan State to be undefeated at this point in the season. If any running back on a winning team deserves to be up there, is Kenneth Walker. And then you got to include Matt Corral at Ole Miss. You know, he's top 10 in passing efficiency, 3rd in total offense, and has Ole Miss sitting right outside the top 10. And the only game he hasn't looked impressive in was that game against Alabama. And then my honorable mentions would be Kenny Pickett and Desmond Ridder at quarterback for Cincinnati and Pitt. I think both of them are on the outside looking in right now, but they're both going to have their moments to shine later in the season.
Yep, and we still got some tough weeks coming up in college football that will probably go ahead and define that a little bit better as these games play out. Well, listen, my friend, a great week. We had so much information this week to talk about that the show, almost went as long as our regular show does when we have a special guest on. But a great show. Ladies and gentlemen, want to remind you that we will be back next week, Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, same station. You can catch Frankly Speaking Sports, or go to the Blue Bloods, and you can see the updates and the different previews that Zach does on a day-to-day basis for the upcoming games this weekend. I know he's dropped a couple already, and I'm sure he'll be dropping a couple more in the next couple days.
Absolutely. Yep. We already dropped our Oregon, UCLA, our Pitt, Clemson, our Coastal Carolina, App State, and tomorrow we'll have Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and Tennessee, Alabama next week. I mean, tomorrow for this upcoming week.
And you can follow Zach at on Twitter at _Blue Bloods, and you can follow me on Twitter at Larry Frankus. That's with a US at the end. For all of you, thank you so much for joining us. I know a lot of you will be watching this on the replay, as we don't share it until after the show. Enjoy the show. You can still leave comments. We'll try to get to them, and we'll see you next week. Same time, same place, and same channel. Good night.